What day did you think it was?
I don't know.
Okay.
Did you say okay?
A day, okay.
Loading right now.
Okay.
Got about 3 seconds.
Welcome to our Tuesday, September 19, 2023 Finance Committee meeting. We will begin with a call to order. Board members introducing themselves, starting to my left.
Colin McGough.
Megan Carlson.
Becky Fless,
Chris McLaughlin.
administrative staff.
Pat Hopkins, Superintendent.
Andrea Dish, Business Manager.
R, Adult Ed Director.
Carrie McGuire, Director of Technology.
Gabe Dosty, Director of Operations.
And friends in attendance.
Teachers, Amber Dosty, social studies teacher, parent.
Human. Yeah, and
Rusty Greenleaf.
excellent, welcome, thank you. We will begin our discussion. First on the agenda is the next steps for our consolidated elementary school.
Okay, so at the last school board meeting, I presented some information to you that I gathered from the Department of Education from Scott Brown. As a reminder, Scott recommended that the school board hire engineers to do a complete assessment of all of our schools so that we are in a position to be able to complete an application for new construction when that door opens. Part of the reason for doing that is once you put your building in the system, you're then held harmless for any of the repairs that you make. So if you replace a roof after they do the inspection, that repair doesn't impact your rating. So he recommended that we do that. Following our meeting, you all asked me to go back to him, and I found a number of contractors or firms. So he provided me a list of firms that the DOE works with. And he reminded me that if a firm agrees to charge us $25,000 or less, then we can just contract directly with the firm. If it's more than that, as a reminder, the law requires that you go through our RFQ process. So just keeping that in mind. The other thing, as a reminder, is that the Department of Education is going to be involved in what they're identifying as the main school facilities inventory project, in which they've secured funding, and they're going to do an assessment of over 600 public schools in Maine. There will be a visitor, someone will be visiting to take a brief site visit, but it's my understanding, Gabe, this is news to you, and I'm very sorry to have to deliver this news. But my understanding is there are going to be about 100 questions per building that will have to be answered. And that all of that information will be going back to the Department of Education to help them determine what the state of the school facilities are across the state of Maine. So even while that is a lot, I will help you as much as I can. So will Andrea, but we have to submit this information. If we really want the state to have accurate data, we have to do our part and make sure that we dedicate the time to submitting those applications as completely as possible. So I have not heard when that's going to begin, but that should be beginning soon because it's expected that the project will be completed by this summer of 2024. So that's what I have, and I guess I need some direction from the Finance Committee. That was going to be the discussion here today on how are we going to proceed, or if we are going to proceed in pursuing a consolidated elementary school. If you are, first step is to think about engineers. Keep in mind that you didn't have, no decision was made before we built the budget. So if it is in excess of 25,000, if it's 25,000 even, that's probably more than what you have in your budget. How much do we have set
There's
aside?
15,000 in the
15.
budget.
So,
So how much do those things cost? I mean, I know a lot. but-
oh, they can cost a lot, and if it's all 6 buildings,
Yeah, that's a lot.
could be a lot.
Everything's changed after COVID. The price of everything has
Oh, yeah,
changed.
for sure.
So I'm not sure that even if we have relative information from before, that it's pertinent to know.
I don't want to tell anybody what to do. However, I know that we don't have any money to cut from the budget year over year. And I understand that that's a thing that mystifies taxpayers, but we don't have money to cut. So the place we can cut is if we don't have if we don't have 5 buildings to support. That's,
4 elementary buildings.
well, there's 4 elementary buildings, but there's 3 buildings over in Pittston. And I mean, when I'm thinking buildings, I'm thinking all the buildings that we have that we could consolidate. Yes, we have 3, but we have many buildings. So the only way, we cannot stop providing services. We cannot control any and all of the special ed services that continue to come into the district, that continue to spend money that we didn't budget. And we're happy to do it because we are all about kids. But when it comes to, we keep saying money only goes so far. So I don't have another solution.
Can we invoke the court magician over there and say if we had to find $25,000 unbudgeted to do the assessment, what would you recommend in terms of either deferred spending, offsets, or other revenue sources we might consider?
Well, you have contingency, so, but there's another conversation that we're going to have tonight about another facilities issue that we're having. And you also have $50,000 in a reserve account that we have access to. So I would be in favor of spending the $25,000 for such a study.
We don't know if it's 25 yet, though.
Yeah,
We
no,
haven't-
I think that's the first thing
We haven't
to
got
find
any
out.
prices,
Yeah.
Can you
right?
Correct.
Just a quote or something?
Correct.
About-
Yeah, we'd probably have to go out for, as he recommends, you would have to go out for the RFQ
Request, yeah.
and see what we get.
So that wouldn't be a bid process, it would be a request for qualifications. So we'd look at their qualifications and then we would
Go from there.
negotiate.
Yeah, yeah. The other, something else to keep in mind, sorry, I had to pause for a moment, I almost lost my train of thought. But kind of in line with what you were saying, Becky, I'm not sure if any of you have had a chance to look at the enrollment numbers that we sent. And there is one particular grade, okay, without identifying the grade, but we have one particular grade where we have class sizes in one building that are around 17. We have class sizes in another building that are about 19. We have class size in another that is now around 14. So there is just no consistency. And we absolutely, if we were in one building, could have more consistent class sizes across the district, so.
More consistent everything. across
Correct,
the
which
district.
saves the district money.
It'd provide a greater ability for us to manage because there would be more options right now with only 1 or 2 classrooms, as Pat said.
Yeah, I mean, if you have 2 teachers, example, and you have 25 students, you can't have just 1 teacher. You're going to have 2 teachers, and now you're gonna have class sizes of 12 and 13. But you have to, whereas in another school, you might have class sizes of, again, 18, 19, depending upon the population there, so. The bubbles are never in the right place. Yeah.
Never.
And so if we could have a better method of deciding those things, I think at the first look, People won't like it at all. One school, we moved to this community, that's what we want to do. We moved here for that reason, and I understand it. My kids went to the school in the community I moved into. However, if we're going to provide an education for every student and we want it to be the most excellent that we can provide, we have to make everyone has to make sacrifices. And I don't personally think it's a sacrifice for our kids to all be together because they're going to be together at grade 6 anyway. So
Right.
I'd rather have the money in the classroom than in the infrastructure.
Absolutely.
I mean, no offense to
100%.
infrastructure, it's vital.
absolutely, in a classroom or in real estate. I mean, it's.
The downside that you'll have to think about, and I agree, I mean, we've already talked about the
Mhm.
fact that if you only have one building, we can easily just cut $1 million from the budget without even blinking,
Mhm.
okay? So we know that there could be a savings for taxpayers. But there are still some hard decisions that have to be made. So one, if you have one school, depending on the location,
Mhm.
we have 4-year-olds,
Mhm.
5-year-olds that are living in rural parts of MSAD11. And they are already on the bus for 45 minutes to an hour getting to their elementary school. So we'll be adding time to the length of their ride on the bus. That is a factor that needs to be discussed.
Pat, is that based on like the current availability of the busing fleet? Are there more creative ways to tackle that? Because I don't think you can drive a whole hour across the 4 towns. So is that really just
If you're stopping at every other house, you can.
but I mean-
That's really a Gabe
Yeah, so,
question.
and a lot of it is, if we were to have one school, all those buses would come to that one school. We wouldn't have to worry about trying to split all of the bus runs per town. Even now, we have Riverview and LER that overlap all each other. So there's double bus runs that overlap each other. So I think it would be redoing the routes in a way that would, I think, be hopefully easier to manage and potentially lower the number of routes we may need potentially, or make those routes a little shorter just because of the way we can reroute with the software. So there could be some adjustments there for sure.
Not to mention, the consolidated school would also be an answer in the event that CDS was passed to the schools currently. If we are forced, I shouldn't say forced,
Required.
if we are required, thank you, to have CDS students, we currently have no place to put them. So that would provide us
It's not really an if, it's a when.
it's a when, it's a recurring conversation, it's a matter of
It's going to
when.
happen,
Mhm.
and we're not.
We could be ready with our beautiful new facility and our beautiful area for the, I'm just trying to be really positive.
I don't know if anybody caught this on the radio last week, but they were talking about closing a local maternity ward simply because of the decline. And they said it's been a 20% decline in birth rates over the last 5 years. And that's a bubble ahead of us,
Right.
and not just us, but the whole state in terms of serving education. So I think like looking down that road a little ways and thinking about what best serves the families at that point is really important.
And we talk about people moving into our communities, but they're not bringing children, or they're not having children.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, that's, I don't think we can just wait for it to start increasing again, because it doesn't seem to show that that's going to happen.
Yeah, I don't think so, but I think that we have to look to the future of what the needs of our families, our communities are. We know that last year we lost 4 to 6 daycares. So with a new facility, is there an opportunity to have before and after school care and do it in a way, not to put anyone else out of business, that's not the intent, and not to compete with the Boys and Girls Club. But certainly is there an opportunity to do something there? There is a year-long waiting list for the Boys and Girls Club.
Multiple years, for sure.
So it does open the door for some creative thinking and how we can better partner with our families.
Chris, do you have any?
No, just my biggest concern is money to the taxpayers, so.
Mhm.
I know I asked for this a while ago, but we're not quite there yet where we can kind of say what we're gonna save in capital costs, paving, facilities, staffing versus what we're gonna have to pay in a bond or however we decide to pay for the school or whatever the state can, depends on what the state does. There's a lot of moving parts, so I know we're a long way from seeing those real numbers. But that's the biggest concern when I talk about giving up the three little small schools and consolidating one. Definitely see the benefits of it. There's some negatives too and some obstacles, but ultimately we're saving money yearly. And you get some positives. That's what I'm waiting to see, so.
Yeah, as a reminder, the current turnkey cost per square foot is about $550. And so I'm told that in the next few years, we should easily plan on that increasing to $600 per square foot. So depending upon the size of the building that we need, I was told for an elementary school, we could be looking at 75 million. Now, if the state funds that, of course, who knows? If the state funds 60% of that or more. I mean, in some communities, it's my understanding that if you actually consolidate schools, you rank higher. Right? There is an incentive for that. So you get more money for that. So we don't know how that would all play out. The DOE would like to see 29 acres. Where would that even be? I don't know.
29 acres.
That's so big.
Yeah, because when you think about the size of the building, you think about the
Sports
parking
fields.
and the fields. Now they're play fields, they're not.
Still, that's
But in our
factored in.
communities, you are going to want some sport fields, you're right. I mean, if you think about how well used our fields are for soccer practice and, all of those things, those youth games. So it's something to absolutely think about, and not knowing what the department would pay,
Right.
it's hard to know the impact to taxpayers. Yes, we can come up with an estimate, like I said, without even thinking about it.
Right.
We can come up easily with 1.2 million. That's not even thinking about facilities. That's just staffing to consolidate into one building. Is that enough to pay the bond? I don't know.
Don't know.
It might be. It might not be. It's also thinking about, and Andrea has talked about this a number of times, is some of our buildings, let's pick on Pittston Randolph. We've heard this fall about the water issues that we're having and the expense to repair those water issues. Those buildings are getting older and older. How much more money are you going to invest in those facilities if you're only going to own them for a few more years? But then you also want them to be well-maintained, right, and safe for our students and staff. And they may have a life beyond us, right? There is a big housing crunch. Do you, for elderly housing or out-of-district placement, like T.C. Hamlin was sold to Margaret Murphy. Who knows what the potential use of those facilities could be. And so if you're going to sell them to a private entity down the road, if that's what you decide to do, then you want to make sure that you're selling a property that you've maintained. And you're not just getting rid of it to get it off of your books.
It would be my preference, however, that we're not taking out any big bond projects that we continue to pay on, like we continue to pay on the T.C. Hamlin project. Especially if we're already having the conversation about consolidation, address things as needed, but
Is it too soon and or worthwhile to inquire about what we could do with our buildings? As far as, is there a market for elderly housing or for affordable housing?
absolutely.
I mean,
I said absolutely.
is it too soon to look at that?
Yes.
Okay, that's.
I don't know.
That's my
I don't
question.
know where I would go. I think
Yeah.
I would reach out to someone in real estate or
That's
maybe
what I
to the
was meaning.
city to
Right.
see.
I'm trying to remember the name of the place. There's a very successful conversion of an old elementary school in Gorham that was turned into elder housing.
Mhm.
We have one in Waterville. My old junior high was turned into a It's
It's a
beautiful.
perfect, there's a bunch of old schools in like Oregon too that have been turned into all kinds of different stuff, but I vote for the housing for sure, elderly housing. No way.
And it seems like every night there's a news story on the news about housing and affordability. It just, it
Housing
seems to
for
be.
veterans.
It seems to be a constant issue in this state right now.
Maybe there's a generous developer listening out there who'd like to give us $1 million
That's right.
surety against a future sale.
Right.
You never
You never
know.
know, that's
Yeah.
where I'm at, people
Yeah.
think I'm bananas, but
Okay,
they're out there.
we'll lean into the goodness.
So as a next step,
Yes.
would you like for us to just put out an RFQ and see what we get? See if there's any interest out there?
That doesn't hurt. I mean, we don't know what we're approving for a price if we don't know the prices.
Correct.
Yeah.
But if at least we can have some of these, it's CHA, Harriman, LaValley, Oak Point, Stephen Blatt, and WBRC.
And you said you had to do all the schools, Pat?
He recommended you do all the
All
schools,
the schools.
especially thinking about the
Even if we're just
condition.
consolidating the elementary, they want to see
Yes.
the study for all of them.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
It makes sense doing it all at once.
Yeah, because they have to rate all 4 of them. But in the meantime, really thinks we should do the middle school and the high school as well. I mean, Edward Little just opened their doors to a brand new high school.
So did South Portland, right, a combined school?
But Edward Little, their building opened only 2 years prior to Gardner Area High School.
Really?
So we opened in 63, I believe, and they opened in 61. So,
And they just
you
got
know,
a
it's
new one?
comparable. They just got a new one.
I think we may be surprised where we rank, once we kind of go through this whole process, and may be surprised where a high school, middle school come in on the list. It may be higher to the top of the list than we think.
Yeah, every time an issue surfaces, like Gabe, make sure you
Yeah.
keep that, write that down.
We keep, I mean, we keep being in the high 20s, 30s every time we do this.
Yeah, I
And
mean, you look at the old Coney High School, and that's the same sort of design as the Gardner High School. And they've had a new school up there for quite some time.
And
Are
the
you allowed
old
to
Coney
include
is elderly.
groundhog infestation as part of the?
Right?
Sure. Yes, we have some ground issues, sure.
And Pat, you said that everything all of our improvements after this study are not held against us, so it would make sense for us to do that as soon as
Now,
possible.
before we spend any money. Yeah.
We should do it.
We should make sure we save that video of the water being cleared out of the hallway. So that we can share that with the department.
We have that.
Yeah.
And the groundhog sitting in an Adirondack smoking a cigar.
Next to the.
Not feeling a bit bad.
Okay,
Oh,
so
goodness, yeah, we need to start pursuing.
RFQ
Yeah.
is that what you're all
I
in?
agree.
And we've used Steve Blatt before.
I guess I
Yes,
do want
we
to make
have.
sure
I'm
Gabe feels like he
surprised
has enough capacity
that
to
he's
actually do the assessment without additional help, or maybe do need additional.
Yeah, I mean.
Yeah, we'll see.
I say we do the
Oak Point has a
RFQ and
really
we
good
see where we get back
reputation.
and to see what.
Steve Blatt did the Helen
what they
Thompson
recommend
School and
that I
starting
need
with
to
some of
do
our
for
other
them.
schools.
I mean,
I
they'd just be
have met
walking
him many
engineers through
times.
and going through paperwork, those sort of things, so.
Okay. I just think it's fair for you if it turns into a serious data collection project to come back and say like, I need another hand here.
Yeah, so we can always address that if that's needed, but I think we're, this is the first step. Let's get some pricing and see where this takes us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, thank you, everyone. Next, the 2025 community project funding.
Yeah, so if you remember back in the spring, we became aware that there is this funding called community project funding that becomes available to our congressional leaders once a year. Now, it's an annual thing. In the future, it's the possibility they'll never have access to this again. But according to this, each year, the United States Congress considers and enacts annual appropriations bills, I'm sorry, what I have is cut off, so I may not, these may not be complete sentences. Appropriations, bills, fund numerous activities, including general government operations, medical research. Proud to fight for federal assistance, so see, I'm cutting, something's cut off. But members of Congress are able to submit like 15 requests each year that are critical to enriching communities in their area. What's the term that I want? In their division, in their
District?
district, in their district, sorry. And so last year, we explored that idea, if you would remember, and we were told that it was going to take a lot more work than we really had time to do. And they recommended that if we're serious about submitting an application, that we do our work now. And I had spoken with Jared Golden's office, spoke with someone down there who was amazing.
They're very good.
Yeah, she was great. And she said, call late summer, early fall. She'd be happy to come up and have a talk with us. And that they have caps in place of about $1 to $2 million. You have to have a match of about 10%, although that sometimes they flex that. And what we had looked at was actually repairs to the pavements, like at the high school and the middle school, because we have so much community activity there, that we might be able to get some funding through this particular process to help cover the cost. Now, in order to do that, we would need drawings. So you might need a little engineering support. We need to have letters of support from the town, from organizations who are benefiting from using our facility. So that would have to happen. We would need an estimate on the equipment, on the labor. And if it were approved in the spring, because usually there's like a 3-week window, that's it, to get this information submitted, then the money doesn't actually become available for another year, okay? So it would be a year out. But last spring, you indicated that there was interest in us pursuing this for next spring. There's no guarantee, of course, that if we submit that it would be funded. Examples of what's been funded in the past, this was through Shelley Pingree, I believe, this list, but it was $500,000 to the All Fund Youth Center in Waterville. There was $500,000 to MSAD in Portland for recovery housing. There was actually $3 million to Goodall Memorial, a library. There was $1 million to Mercy Hospital to address workforce training. There was $1 million to Preble Street. There was $1 million to the town of Limerick for water and sewer mains replacement. There was over $600,000 to the Greater Portland Immigrant Welcome Center. So it's worth a shot if you are interested in us trying to pursue to try to get some funds to help with some of the paving at the high school.
Can I throw another idea for a project? Maybe our high school track, which is going to be in need of repair, which sounds a lot sexier than
Yeah.
paving.
Or a combination of both.
Well, and the community does use the track
Sure.
more
A lot.
than
Yeah.
the pavement. So, and then we know that that's going to need to be tackled.
It's kind of like paving.
Food for that.
Yeah, I like that, Andrea.
Thank you.
Excellent.
So if you are still in support of us just researching this, I would be happy to call back this person that I spoke with before and have a conversation, maybe have a meeting with Andrea, Gabe, and myself to think about how we can pursue this and position ourselves for an application in the spring.
Sure.
I think that's a great idea.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, then I will get on it.
Perfect.
Remind me to show you the pictures of Hannah and Jared Golden's off.
I will do that.
Putting her feet up on the desk.
All right, next,
Athletic
athletic
workers.
workers. So I think I've already given you a heads up about this. I'm sorry, I don't recall.
I got a heads up.
But we had an email from a staff member who has worked as a game worker for years for our school district. And at the beginning of the school year, she has requested that there be an increase in running the clock for the boys and girls soccer, lacrosse, for JV football, et cetera. Actually, she wants it for all sports. And she feels that she's been here for 15 years doing all of these things for us. And in all that time, there has not been, there hasn't been an increase in 8 years. And so she is requesting that there be a $10 per game raise, feels that that is warranted. So what I've done is I've shared with you how much we currently pay per sport for each position. So you can see fall, winter, spring. So we range somewhere between 30 and 45 in the fall, 30 to 45, actually to 60 potentially in the winter. And that's wrestling, because wrestling is more of an all-day thing, so it costs a bit more. But the regular games would be 30 to 45. And in the spring, they would range, it's really around 25, 30, and then any coverage for the athletic director, if the athletic director couldn't be there. This tennis that's down here for 40, they said that's just not legit. We just don't pay it. It may be on the books that is how much someone is paid, but in reality, that doesn't happen. So you can kind of cross that off. And the other piece, just before you say anything regarding baseball and softball, there's a difference in the amount by $5. Okay, and the difference is that in baseball, that this person has to pitch count and is required to keep track of pitches, and that is not required in softball. So it's a
Oh.
different responsibility, which is why it's a little bit more. That was my first question, like,
Right.
why are we paying baseball more than we're paying softball? But that's the reason.
Okay.
So I then reached out as best I could to some of my colleagues. I did not have a lot of people respond, a lot of school districts. In RSU 2, they in the fall they pay their varsity, and they did not differentiate between football and soccer. I guess they pay them the same. They're $60. For JV, it's $40. In middle school, it's $40. In winter, they only have basketball and they pay $75 for varsity, $50 for JV, and $50 for middle school. And in the spring, they only have track, and they pay the starter $75. This is per game, not per hour.
And that's, where was that?
Two.
RSU? Okay.
RSU 2.
RSU 2 doesn't have football.
They go with Winthrop, so they may.
Oh, so they may contribute towards Winthrop.
Okay.
Right.
Winthrop?
Their football, Monmouth and Winthrop's football teams
Our RSU
are
too.
joined. They're one team.
Oh, and you know
I
what?
see, okay.
It's not football, it's field hockey. There you go. Sorry, make a little more sense.
Wait a minute.
I wrote the wrong thing, it's field hockey.
Okay.
And 38, which is Miranda Cook,
Yeah.
they range between 30 and 60. They say football and basketball, they pay their varsity $60. In 54, which would be Skowhegan, it says 19 to 26, depending upon the job, but I don't know if that's per game or per hour, it didn't say. It seems really low if it were per game. Up in 49, it says $25 a game, but for football, they give ticket takers $34 a night. And Winslow says that they're similar to us. So,
All over the place.
it's all over the place. I don't know what your thoughts are again. This is the same amount that we've paid for 8 years. It seems like an increase is warranted. However, this is coming in after the budget was developed. So I don't know how much we currently pay in these accounts.
I don't, because of other, choose my words, other shortfalls in the athletic budget this year, I don't see us being able to do sweeping changes. However, I am concerned about minimum wage violations. I think we need to make sure that we're at least paying people minimum wage. I'm not recommending that we be paying people $20 an hour. If you think about the length of a game or the approximate length of a game, I just think we need to be cognizant of coming in. I don't know.
Yeah,
Do
absolutely.
you have any like ballpark, like if we adopted this set of recommendations, what's the total increase to the annual expenditure for this? Like, are we talking $1,000 or 100,000? Yeah, it's not
It would
100,000.
be, it would be more than 1,000. We have a lot of game workers, multiple game workers for the same game. So you have ticket takers, you have timers, you have, so,
I'm
Well,
trying
this
to be
isn't
real-
just the clock people then?
no.
So I would think before we even consider anything like an increase, we would need to do like we did when we did the athletic audit, and that is figure out how many, what are we talking about? Is it 50 people, 8 people? What are we
Yeah.
talking about?
So my
And with the start of
recommendation,
school, we haven't had a chance to do
Oh,
that
of course not,
preliminary
no,
work, but
no.
my recommendation would be to make sure that we're not paying people less than minimum wage.
yeah.
That is my primary concern. So I'm trying to think of a way that we could do that.
Well,
Maybe start there.
I think we start with contacting Nate. And one, we need to know how many workers at each game, right? How many people he employs, how many hours per person.
So when he budgets this money, it's for a variety of reasons. So if you've got a custodian who's staying after to cover either a football or a basketball game, that comes out of that pot. There are a lot of things coming out of the same pot of money. So if we've increased hourly wages for other people, it all is going to draw on the same account. Are you? Mhm.
I'm afraid to
Sorry.
ask this because I know where it can go. Is there a simple payroll report that shows everybody who got paid out of these lines? Or is it a lot of different workers getting a time adjustment based on what they did that week?
There,
I don't want to ask Nate to go like do the world's most complicated report just to give somebody $5 more. Like that doesn't make sense.
when Nate is budgeting these, he's looking at our expenditures from the previous year. He's not looking at it by per game and per person. That's just not how it's being budgeted. So,
So why don't we go back to a little bit more of this work?
Yeah.
And put it back on the agenda for October. I know this is crazy busy time of the year. September is the worst for you. So
Worse than April?
Is it? Well,
Wait a minute.
Every month.
there are a lot of deadlines through,
Right.
I would recommend that we pay people based on minimum wage or the higher of the two until, because I certainly don't want a labor violation. So if we're paying people less than minimum wage, then we should be paying minimum wage,
Absolutely.
right?
But I want to have a larger analysis and not just adjust minimum wage. I want us to do a larger review
I think that's perfect.
and bring it back in
I
October.
think that's a great idea.
And I'm sorry, Chris, you
No,
started.
I was just, yeah, that's what, because we don't even know what it's gonna cost, so.
And this is something that the first time you mentioned it to me, I didn't even know this existed. So this has been going on for years and years and years, and I don't remember it ever coming to this committee in this way. And I'm not upset about it. I just think we need to make a very logical, fact-based, like, are these people, are they W-2 employees?
Yes.
No idea.
most of them are already employees, and you need to be cognizant of those
Yeah.
employees who, most of them are 30-hour-a-week employees.
Okay.
Okay, so there's some, before they hit overtime, we need to make sure that the people who are doing it, it's not throwing them into a situation where they're working more than 40 hours a week, because there's another labor thing. So Pat's right, we need to take a step back and look
Absolutely.
at how many people per game.
Length of the game.
Yeah.
So we have a better grasp of what's going on before.
How many home games?
We need sweeping changes.
Right. And I'm not saying anybody hid anything or was
No,
not
no, no.
transparent.
No, this is,
We just don't know. So.
Yeah. mhm,
And this has been in
Cost of
place
doing
for
business.
years and years.
yeah.
Oh, and I don't doubt that. I just don't know that it ever came here.
It's a 2-hour game.
Yeah, I don't remember. They said it was 8 years. I don't remember where it would have gone.
We also need to say thank you and respect the people who've been showing up to do this, because this is clearly
Absolutely.
like,
Oh,
you got you
absolutely.
a sandwich and maybe half a gallon of gas, so.
Yeah.
Right, maybe. Yeah. No, you're
Pat, would you
absolutely
mind
right.
asking Nate one more question when you dive in there, which is,
Sure.
what's the demand side look like? Is he struggling to fill these spots? Meaning that we need a better incentive, or are people just doing it out of the goodness of their hearts, in which case this is really not.
I see nodding on the other side of the room.
Yeah, I mean,
Greater incentives.
yeah, I don't think he has a large pool of people to pick from. I think you're gonna find it's a very narrow group of people that are doing all of these games.
So is it,
I don't think he's tried to, honestly, I don't think he's tried to reach out beyond the school. There are people who may be able to do it, who would be open to being paid to working at it, being able to see a game while working a game at the same time. So I think that there's opportunity, but Colin's right. I appreciate the people who've been doing it all along.
Okay, we'll ask that question. Okay, great. So that will be on the October agenda. Okay. Then the next one is the Gardner Regional Middle School retaining wall. So as you drive by the middle school, in the front, there are some solar panels. And there's a retaining wall underneath that, and it is crumbling. So Gabe.
Yeah, so the retaining wall that's there is holding the bank back. When there was addition done to the school, they decided to put a front bus loop. So in doing that, they had to build a retaining wall to hold the bank back to give it proper frost coverage on the hillside. The wall is still holding, but what's happening is with the storms that we're having, it's dumping a massive amount of rain in a short period of time. I mean, if you look across the state in the news, it's happening everywhere. Roads are washing out in Jay, and so those sort of things are happening here to this bank. The water comes off the roof. The gutter that's there that protects the solar panel is being overwhelmed with the amount of water that's coming off. It's hitting the ground below, and the ground is already so saturated that it's just washing down the hill. So if you go over there, you'll see on the sidewalk, there's a large amount of sand that's been in front. Every storm we get, it just washes more down. And what it's actually done early summer, the whole bag actually slid a bit. So it kind of all came down at once, and the retaining wall held, but now it's pocketed in the top. So every time it rains, it just holds on the top of the retaining wall area, and then it runs underneath all of the fabric that we have that holds the bank in place. So it's slowly eroding the whole bank out. So what really needs to happen is all the vegetation needs to be cut out. All of the material that's there to hold the bank in place needs to be removed. We need to put new geotextile fabric, secure it in place, do a whole new layer of stone riprap. And then also on the top, we need some sort of divert or ditch for the water that does come off the roof to bring it down to the catch basin. The worry is if it continues and it keeps going, the wall that is still stable there now will be destroyed. It will push out eventually. Yep.
Is there stuff adjacent to that that's at risk of damage when that wall goes?
I mean, if the wall goes, it's the sidewalk, it's the light poles that are there, the pavement, I don't, the building's not at risk at any collapse or anything like that. But if it does get further in the wintertime, we're losing more frost coverage as the dirt is eroded. So it's something that I feel cannot wait. It needs to be fixed
Like emergent now?
as this fall.
Okay.
Definitely.
Couldn't,
I'm worried if it continues, we will lose the wall. If we lose the wall down below, we're gonna be talking another 40,000 on top of the potential 30,000 we're looking at just to fix what's there.
couldn't we redirect the drainage from the roof to prevent the problem?
So part of that is redirected already from the solar panels. So the size gutter that you would need because of the size of the roof, it wouldn't hold up. And in the wintertime, it's gonna fill up with ice, it'll end up breaking. The best way is to redirect the water once it does come down for that portion of it towards the catch basin. But to do that, we would need to do this project. Yep. So we have received 2 estimates, between 25 and 34,000.
You actually had 3.
We had reached out to 3, but the other one said it would be well over 30,000, so where we already had one from a local contractor that's just over the 24,000, it's be my recommendation to have them do it.
And this is a company that you trust?
Yep, it's a company we've used in the district many times. Yep, and they know our facilities, we work hand in hand on other projects.
And this is a request outside of the preset budget?
It's non-budgeted.
Okay.
So we would need to think outside the box and see if we can, some of it find money in the other projects that we haven't done, or it comes from contingency, which we do have, which Andrea can speak to that.
So the problem is there aren't a lot of projects we didn't leave a lot of projects in our budget for this year. Contingency, it's the same contingency and reserve account I just spoke about when we were looking for money for the architect. I also, while I'm very cognizant or very aware of the issue, we are also very early in the school year. So I worry about using all of our contingency and our reserve in September when there is 9 more months of school remaining in this school year.
You have the risk of not doing it.
I understand.
It's only a $50,000
I
project.
completely understand.
That's my worry. I mean, if it does blow out in the middle of winter where the whole wall goes, we're stuck with twice as much money that we need to take out of contingency that we already did have.
So we could do the wall in September and the contingency for the architect in October or November. So then we're a little bit further into the school year. I mean, we need to do, we have to do.
I know, and this is the tough part when we've already cut so much out of our budget.
Yeah.
We're left with very little.
I mean, roofs are not, are something that we can postpone and
But not forever.
roofs are not
Not
something that we can postpone. So
Because we have postponed some, yes?
How about
No, we're on cycle.
We're on cycle. We have a roof schedule that was supposed to be done this summer, but it has not been done. It is under a signed contract, but they're planning on doing it in April.
I also,
There's so much rain.
And I also
Oh,
have-
of course they can't. No, of course not.
I also have concerns about the Hope Field project, trying to bring that in under what's remaining in that account, so. Can we revisit this in October? Can I look?
I don't think so. I think part of the concerns here, Andrea, is that you're not gonna be able to do this work once the ground starts to freeze. So, I know. there's not a good solution here, but the longer we wait, we don't know the contractor's schedule, whether the contractor can even squeeze it in the fall. Then the ground starts to freeze, and is it gonna cost even more than what was estimated? So now we're looking at 35,000 because we waited a month or two.
I completely understand. We're in September. We've already had an issue with water at Pittston. We had a flood at the high school. I just don't want to drain all of our resources. So I completely
I know.
agree. I feel like we're
Our choices are-
between a rock and a hard place.
But it does seem fair to ask though, in all fairness, is there any reasonable, reliable mitigation that would get us through 1 year? Say bracing, reinforced concrete, steel beams, what have you, so.
Yeah,
we
I
know it
mean,
won't fail.
really, it's the vegetation that's there. I mean, most of the money is just getting the vegetation and the material that's there out of there. It's a hard place to work because it's such a steep bank. Most machines can't reach that height. I could go back and talk to McGee and see if they could temporarily put something just to try to stabilize what's there. We could. There again, it's tough. It's hard. It's hard to get in there. If anybody's driven by there, it is so overgrown. And it's been that way since I started here. And I think we just assumed that growth just held the bank in place.
Right.
But with the crazy weather we've had, it's just completely undermined underneath the fabric. And that's what's happening. It's getting under it. We've tried to stabilize some of the top, but it still just keeps washing out on the top. And it's all the handwork that we've done up there.
And what would be the worst case scenario if we waited till spring, at least to get us through the bulk of the year?
I mean, if we don't have it now, how are we gonna have it in the spring? That's kind of.
Well, at least I would.
I mean, we're not gonna have it in the spring.
We'll be in the same situation financially, however, we'll have a few more months of budget behind us. It's just,
money in case something happens besides this.
Like if all the rest of the pipes blow out.
Right, or a roof falls down or
you
something.
know, unfortunately, we have a rather large deductible on our insurance, and I just worry that I'm not saying,
No, I know.
I'm not opposed, I'm just saying, can we delay in the
I
spring?
mean, if we delay, we might as well just delay and leave it until spring and hope for the best. I don't know.
What's required to do it? It's massive project that requires earth moving equipment and
Yes.
things like that
And
and.
that's the most costly part.
Right. And there were multiple quotes. You got 2 different ones, you said, right?
Right, and they need a special excavator that can have a bucket that rotates 360 degrees to be able to because they can't pull the material down the bank because of the wall. We're trying to salvage and save the wall to cut the cost down. Really, the way to do it, if we had an endless pool of money, would be to completely redo the whole bank and redo the design completely. And would be to take the old retaining wall out and redo it and almost terrace it up. We don't have that, so to try to do it, to salvage what's there, they actually have to cut all the vegetation out, and then it's all large 6 to 8 inch rocks that are there with the fabric underneath. And they actually have to try to scoop up or do it by hand to try to hand take it out of there. And they have to do underneath the solar panel and again, divert what's there away from the wall. So it's labor intensive and it's a special piece of machinery and there's only a couple people that have those around, or they would have to rent one because they don't have one. So that was the big part of why it costs so much is the machinery. So
Are you saving the vegetation or?
vegetation is all just overgrown growth that's there.
Right, and it's shallow root systems.
Yep.
So that doesn't help hold the ground.
Everything just needs to be taken out and
Right.
it's washing underneath all of that right now is what it's doing. So it's so hard to get there to do anything other than, we could just dump more rock on the top, but my worry is it's just gonna put
Yeah,
more
it's just
weight and
more,
pressure against
yeah.
everything.
So when it finally goes, it's all
I think
really
really
gonna go.
what started is all the fabric and the rock that's there, everything moved
Right.
down the hill as one big piece. And the wall that's below is just kind of holding it there, and the water that comes off the roof is going underneath all of it and washing the sand out constantly, so it just keeps compressing down and just keeps washing it out. Every storm we get 6 to 8 inches of more sand on the sidewalk, and they clear it off with the tractor each time. Yep.
Did you check with the city to see if they have the equipment?
They don't have the bucket that turns all the way around.
Money.
I mean,
Gabe, there's no other projects that aren't desperate that could wait. I mean,
like I said,
I understand contingency being in September. If we have something that puts kids out of school, we need to fix it. We kind of need that money for that. Like, this wouldn't necessarily displace students if it happened, but it would cost us more. But are there any other projects on your radar that could hold off till spring?
so most of the projects that we have are smaller. They're small projects. The only large project that we have that's on the books that we have not done is the roof section that was due for replacement over at the high school. And that will not be done until April now, because they could not fit it in with all the rain we had this summer. They couldn't do it.
That's the only one.
So they held up. So really it would be that project. If we would have to hold that off or cut that project in half. So they section off only and do a half of that section instead of the whole area to repair it back. Which I know they would reprice it. They would do that. It's G&E Roofing that has that contract. And
Is that something we could look at in the spring and see if there's some contingency funds in the spring that could do the whole roof project?
sure. So
I
if
mean,
we
you
did
take care of
that,
this issue now, revisit April, she'll have a better understanding of where the budget's at and can say, yeah, we can do the whole roof project, or no, we can only do half the roof project. I mean, is that an option that we could
I'm
take?
sure I can definitely talk to Steve and see what we can do with the signed contract. They've been great with us in the past, and
If we're looking at April, it could be
well, he
June.
thanked me greatly just to allow him to push it off, because he knows we're a school system, he knows he has to do it in the summer. And they just couldn't get to it. So he asked if we could push it back until April. So I know he would be willing to adjust.
I know Andrea's big thing is we're so early in the budget.
Yeah.
We don't know where we're gonna be with emergencies between now and April, because something else could happen.
And I know,
Right.
and like everybody knows, we had the flood at the high school last week. And that's still not completely resolved with the catch basins and how we're gonna fix that issue there too. So that may be next month's.
And if we have to wait to April for the roof, if they have to do the other half in August, so be it.
Right, so we're gonna have to spend the winter anyway with potentially fixing some leaks here and there, which that's part of our PM, that's in there. We have money we place in there to try to cover all those things. So we would have that anyway. So that doesn't concern me as much, and if we do have to cut that project in half, I'm sure they would be willing to do that half section, or we pick a different section that's on the books to be replaced and swap it out. Yeah, because we have other ones that are coming up next year too, so we can always do a section that's in next year's budget and just swap the two. So we put this year's into next year's and kind of switch them up. That's a smaller or lesser cost project, so we can look into it.
I don't think anyone anticipates that next year is going to be, or FY25 is going to be any easier of a budget year. I highly doubt that our insurance will come in at 0% again. So I just want us to be cognizant of what we're displacing.
Everything I'm hearing is it's gonna be worse. It's gonna be harder.
Andrea, if we got assurance from the roofing company that we could delay that project into the next fiscal year, would you feel good enough about having a reasonable reserve for cash flow purposes?
Sure. I just want to be careful about delaying too many roof projects to fund other projects. While this project has merit, it's not a safety concern, it's just I think Chris's point was well taken, that it's, it doesn't affect students. And while it's a gamble if we wait, but in short, yes.
water does so much damage. That's my concern, is if there's water, then there can be damage we're not seeing. Just like at the high school so same thing with the wall, there can be something happening that we don't see, so.
Nature can be ugly.
Nature can be very ugly, so I think if we can help ourselves by building a defense against nature, I think we'd be wise to do that. So do we want to move forward and bring this to the board for vote to take care of this now and find a way to
I'm not saying put off the route, I'm just saying revisit where we're at in April
Right.
and then decide what it is.
So
postpone?
I'll talk to Steve. I'm sure he'll have no problem doing that for us. And I will get an estimate on if we split it or if we can do one. So we'll kind of try to make that evaluation to see what we can do. And we can have that, I'll have that information for the board meeting or the next finance meeting, whichever is decided.
So we don't accidentally lock ourselves into the project we don't have cash for.
Thank you. All right, so do we want to vote on that or just keep going?
Why don't you vote on it? And what I'm looking at right now is you have a policy regarding your authorization to enter into these types of agreements without the board's approval. And I'm trying to look to see what that threshold is. Do you recall?
Not off the top of my head, sorry. I know we changed them and I don't know the new amounts.
Is it money amount? Is it, we just had a conversation about it not that long ago.
Yeah, and I don't
I
recall off the
don't
top of
remember
my
either.
head.
I think I can see it in my head, but I was wrong, so.
Should do a reverse fundraiser, so every $100 gets to take a brick down instead of.
Instead of putting one up? Yeah. Okay. It's very creative, Colin.
Worth a shot.
I mean, the RFP policy that you have has a $25,000 threshold, so anything below, you do not have to go out for a bid. Anything $25,000 or above, it's either a bid or, as Gabe has done, you have to request multiple sources, which he tried to reach out to 3. All right. I don't see it right here and I don't want to hold this up, so why don't we just plan on talking about it at the board meeting? Gabe, the challenge with that is the next board meeting is going to be on the 12th versus the 5th. All right, but maybe you can get the motion or get everything in motion.
Yep.
And
Yeah, so I'll talk, so the proposal is 24,700.
okay. All right, and I'll take a look at this and make sure that we know what it is before we get to the
Okay.
board meeting. I just don't recall.
So a motion from the board, from the finance committee to move this project to the full board for approval so that we can complete it in the fall.
So moved.
Thank you, Chris.
Second.
Second by Colin. Any more questions or comments? All those in favor? Thank you. And thank you, Gabe, for keeping a watchful eye on the water. It's been the year of,
Sorry for the grilling. It's not that we doubt you at all. It's just to balance it out.
There's a lot of things that have been coming up lately and everything seems to be twice as expensive as it used to be.
yeah,
So it's tough. I'm a parent, I'm a taxpayer in the town, so I completely understand.
no, I appreciate what you're trying to do, so thank you. Last on the agenda is adult ed partnership to expand career and skill development.
Yes, Josh and I recently met And he was sharing with me some important conversations he's been having with community organizations regarding the possibility of expanding and creating a career kind of development facility here in our community. So thought that before he goes too far, he should share it with you.
Good idea.
And kind of get your nod of approval or not. So Josh.
So I think the key to this all is the partnerships piece, is looking for and talking to people who could help support a adult education program that might be in a space other than high school, which opens the door for some access to provide particularly career and skill development courses, workforce development stuff that would be really hard to do in the high school, just given our location and limited access during the day. Some of the specific programs that I have been hearing about, like a CDL program, certainly could not do something like that at the high school. So really been a lot of conversations about what might be possible, what people might be interested in. Obviously, there are lots of workforce development is a huge discussion amongst community colleges, the university system, local businesses, and I've been trying to have those conversations. And I've looked at, is there space anywhere? So particularly in Gardner, we serve, we also have a, well, let me back up. We talked about some of the context right now, right? Like we've had a birth rate that's declined for years. We have lower enrollments. We have 45 years old, I think is the average age of, in Maine. We have a workforce issue where we need more of a workforce. And yet we're not necessarily seeing that come up in our, in our schools to meet those needs. So the need being, we need to have communities that are places people want to live and work, whether that be from other parts of Maine or out of the state or out of the country. So, because that is what's going to sustain our communities. And, the sustainability piece has been kind of, when I started in adult ed, 1.5 days over in Winthrop first year was all about sustainability. How do you sustain this program? We've obviously just started this regional effort to work on sustainability, to help with that and to provide more. Looking forward to how do I keep this program sustainable and how do I contribute in the way to those issues, that context for our communities, because we have some pretty in Kennebec neighbors. I mean, if you think about Gardner, Hollowell, Winthrop, Monmouth, these are some pretty, I think, desirable communities. We have some great downtowns. I mean, there's a lot. So I feel like adult ed is in that place, that's what we should be doing, right? Just working with adults to shift careers, explore options, to enrich the community, to welcome folks to a community, and help them integrate. And so those are all the ideas that I'm pursuing. So I have had meetings with folks at community colleges, the Alphonse Center. I have reached and have some meetings coming up with some local businesses, because we have some large ones here in Gardner in particular. We also have Hannaford, another large one over in Winthrop. So, and kind of engaging in, what if we had a space? How could we support that? How would that be important to your work, and what your aims are? What would that look like for cost? I have talked to a developer about a property and what the property that is in town. So we're getting into that point of like, there's a lot of conversation and potential. And I think that's why Pat said, really should kind of give an update to the board, let them know where you're at, with these things. And it really is, there's no agreements or anything like that, but I do see on the people that I'm talking with, there is some excitement and energy around some of the things that we can possibly do. Did I cover?
You did, but also decided to bring it here to finance because an outcome
Yeah.
of all of this could be a leasing of a facility, right? So there's a cost associated with it. So I wanted to get this on your, kind of on your radar, and get your input on whether it is an initiative you want him to continue engaging in conversations with various organizations, city officials, local businesses.
So as you were talking, I was saying, I serve on the Gardner Main Street Board of Directors, and we've just applied for an entrepreneurial ecosystem grant. And we've been sort of watching what's happening in Skowhegan. They've got some big stuff going on there. I'm big on field trips, so I'm encouraging us to take a field trip so we can watch what they're doing. But maybe a connection between you and Gardner Main Street to have a conversation so that we don't necessarily duplicate efforts, but maybe even work together so that we're, because one of the things we struggle with is how do we get businesses and school and everything all together? How do we do that?
And some of the conversations with, there's a new person at Gardner Main Street, right?
Yep, Tammy Whitman.
And
Yes, yeah.
we had some initial conversations in this last year about support, and with, we actually talked to one of the local banks about how do we support kind of people doing their, what do businesses even have a business plan? Do they
Right.
have, strategies for, being successful?
Yeah.
What kind of things are available to them in terms of financial support? And that conversation. So yeah, there's lots of room for those sorts of conversations. And that just gets into the place where now I'm starting to talk to people about things that, these partnerships that could run into financial commitments. And I'm not making any financial commitments, certainly, but Pat was right in that it doesn't make sense to, keep having that conversation without you all knowing that that's kind of where it's going to. Because I think, I'm looking for funding at the same time I'm looking for the partnership. I'm not, I'm not looking to, I'm gonna come next year with, the $150,000 increase to the adult ed budget with no partnership or potential revenue right along with that. So,
But you're headed down the right road because there's a lot of people who are changing career paths.
yes,
And they need a place, a think tank. There's another place down in Kennebunkport that a friend of mine owns, is in an old factory that is it's a think tank, and it took off like fireworks about 6 years ago. People need a place where they can go work on their resume, network with other people. And that's part of our education, educating the whole person into the, not just ending at grade 12, but into the
Just had a
future.
conversation with Christy McNaughton about if there was an opportunity for high schoolers to have like an entrepreneur, like in the community type of a setting, like what do they do for that? Like have they ever explored having a business or something downtown? Because I just happen to know there's some downtown properties that are empty and could really use some love from the
Right,
community,
right.
And I think that would be, you could fit so many different things in something like that. Like if there was a property downtown and you had the kids down there doing something and getting people in the adult ed doing, career changes or business counseling or whatever it is.
there's been a lot of, in the course of my conversations, there's been a lot of discussion about, better connection for our young adults in high school still, kind of even getting just basic exposure to some things. So CATC, I love it. Both my kids have been in it and has been wonderful, but they know they want to do something. So it became okay, I know I want to do this and I'm going to do this and make that commitment to CATC and do it. Whereas there's still a number of people like, I don't know if I want to do that. So maybe be preventing them. when you think about adults, they don't have a CATC. If I'm like, well, that looks interesting, but how do I know, being able to make a career change is a pretty huge thing. It feels huge. Everybody does it, but most people do it 7 to 8 times or more. But they need a place to explore that, to be able to make those shifts. So some of the conversations I've had have been about, where do they do that? What are the introductory courses, whether it be CDL and the introductory courses that are required for them to get into a program? If it's, how do I know I want to do welding or maybe get into that? How do I know I want to get into a trade like plumbing or electrical? How do I know that? How do I look at that as an option if I don't have a place to be exposed to that? Those are the things that, and then, so that's one piece, that workforce piece and career piece. And then we have a whole slew of people. We talked about the housing crisis. There are new Mainers who are leaving the Portland area because housing is unaffordable.
Impossible.
And there's a lot more discussion by the new Mainers group about Central Maine, not outside of Lewiston, even outside of Augusta, and going to smaller communities, and how that could be a benefit to communities. They've looked at Waterville, but Waterville's housing is pretty, so people are looking around, trying to find that. So there's opportunity there for our community, because there are people who are educated, but maybe English is really the barrier. So there's some opportunity. So there's lots of potential partnerships that could come from something like this, but I guess there's probably a need for some blessing to keep looking at these things and trying to kind of come up with these partnerships, knowing it might lead to a different, moving into a different space.
So my lens is always the budget impact.
Why would that be?
Well, and since it sounds fabulous, and since most of this would fall under the enrichment, I don't see the state, it's not really instructional.
Workforce development would not fall under enrichment. So if we could do work, if we're talking about workforce development, it would, even if there were some costs that we passed on to students, it would not be fall strictly under an enrichment.
My concern would be in entering into a contract for space before we gauge interest in programs.
Yeah.
So no one's entering into any contracts. We're just exploring the feasibility of this. I mean, we certainly heard as a school community from our listening tour, right? And our listening process about really building up the connections between the school district, the community, and the importance of making more community career opportunities available for our students. And so this idea, not only would it benefit the community members who are 25, 30, 35, 45 thinking about a second career, it also could benefit high school students, middle school students in some of that exploration.
I remember our excitement about the driver's ed program, and while we thought we would get a lot more interest in that, I'm just trying to make sure that we're gauging our response. I just want to make from my perspective, I just want to make sure that we're not increasing the amount to the locals, but that would be up to the board.
So
It doesn't sound like that's what we're looking to do, though.
no, and I think if we're looking for partners.
Right.
So partners who want to do this, that adult ed would be a place to do it. And that we could, if we do it that way, then there does become some benefit in the potential. Using some of our funds towards this could result in subsidy impacts. It could result in ongoing partnership and commitments. Being more adaptable in terms of what we can do. I mean, one of the spaces that we have spoken about is, do we have even just a space that is wired, ventilated, that we could use different types of equipment in, that people have, so they could come and do some of that trade work. We don't have, like a shop, right? So that's been, people have liked that idea, not sure how to make that happen, but there's been lots of things. And so there is no commitment to what we're gonna do, and I'm very open to those possibilities, but I certainly don't wanna be going down a path that feels like, no, that doesn't make sense, or we don't wanna do that.
Are you talking about partnerships like the partnerships we have with Maine General for the CNA program?
No, probably more involved than that. I think that's a good partnership. And have had some conversations about improving that with some pre-CNA or pre-healthcare work for folks, which has been kind of the case for a lot of this workforce stuff, is what's the preparation to maybe do it, or to be sure that they want to do it.
Partnerships with somebody who would employ these individuals after they were trained, is that the kind of partnerships we're referring to?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. So there are models like that. There are apprenticeship programs. The Alphon Center has a lot of desire to be committing. They've given money to the community colleges for that reason. They're looking for other opportunities. Community college used to have its, KVCC, for example, used to be in Bucher in Augusta, which they, prior to the pandemic, which they liked having a space beyond and south. They don't have that anymore. So that's something I've asked about with folks at KVCC is, have you thought about that coming to Gardner? I know that's not Augusta, but are there options like that? So it's a lot of these, how could we do this? If we had a space, could we bring people in who would, say we're leasing, but then we have other services or partners who have an office there with us?
So I don't want to dampen your enthusiasm at all.
No.
Because nothing ever gets done unless passionate people put their neck out there and say, let's try something new.
Yeah.
So I really applaud that. I will say, it's hard to sort of like give the blessing or not without knowing more concretely what's really the curriculum package, because like all things to all people.
Yeah, it's more of a blessing to keep going with the conversation without, I don't want to overstep my bounds to say, are there possibilities? Certainly if something came up, if we get to those specifics, and I've thrown out a lot of different things that have come up.
Like a functional shop is very different than like a community room where you can talk about job opportunities. Like those are, they're all out there, but they're very different costs.
Very different, and if you're gonna invest in a space, in my mind, it's, you wanna use that space as much of that space in as many ways as possible. Not to say, I'm gonna get this space and I'm gonna do X project and that's what it's for. That, in my mind, is set up to be, okay, we're gonna do this, we do it for 2 years, and then all of a sudden I don't have a partner because circumstances has changed. I don't have a partner on that piece anymore, and so now I don't have that space, right?
Yeah.
The idea for me is if I can have multiple partnerships, 2 or 3 different things that we can do, that could put us in a space. And then if one of them, times change, needs change, we need to adapt, we can shift. And it might be a different partner, it might be the same partner. But the idea not to be narrowed, and I think that's what I see with other adult ed programs sometimes is, I'm gonna do this one program, we're gonna do that and only that, and they do it really well, but then they get to a point where maybe they don't need to be doing that anymore. And I think we've seen that previously, it was my perspective is, there was a point of saturation with CNA programs, and then some of those fell off and then they're back again. And I think healthcare will always be kind of going back and forth like that, but how do we have a circumstance that allows us to keep the space to do these different things. So is that, I'm sorry.
It does, I guess the three things that would help going forward is like, what's your assessment of the true demand out there? Like maybe we want a space, but what do the people want to show up for? What would medium to long-term partnerships with other businesses or organizations really mean, like contractually?
Yeah.
And then what kind of liability and insurance do we have to think about with operating a site that's not really part of the grounds and covered by facilities?
Yeah. And those are absolutely pieces of some sort of agreement, and I think part of the conversations I've had is how do we do a solid needs assessment around this area that someone is, because like me, I get passionate about stuff and you want to do this, it's great. But there has to be that assessment of what is the real need and desire for this in your community. And so we've talked about that around some of those ideas that have come up. And then, what's the cost, how long is this for and what's our liability? And those are all pieces of it, but I think right now we're finding the right connection to say, okay, yeah, now we move to a needs assessment, see if that's really what we want to do. And then from there, do we go the next?
I mean, I think you should keep talking personally.
Okay, that's
But go into it with eyes open, saying like, it's gonna have to be self-funded, given the state of the current and next year's budget, and whatever happens with consolidation, like.
No offense, but all the projects and all the things that you mentioned, a lot of them are big ticket. I mean, machinists, and I know that you mentioned machinists, but all of those require, in addition to space, a lot of a lot of startup and equipment. So that is my concern that, maybe, I think the partnerships would definitely come first.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And honestly, a lot of, I'm aware of 2 adult ed programs that were able to secure a good bit of, there's one program in Western Maine that has had a truck to be able to do CTL for 2 years, right? So the equipment piece for a number of, or a couple that have had welding equipment. And then it becomes the challenge about how do we, looking to find the certified instructors. And so that is, when we talk about a ticket item, that's the big ticket item. Because you can't pay an electrician enough to, anyway, we're gonna get into a lot of details.
Kind of in the weeds, and there's so many layers to this. It is just, this is a concept, right? It's an idea in a response to a potential need in our community. And so can he continue having conversations just to explore that idea?
Yes.
That's it, to kind of put this on your radar. No commitment, no decision exactly in the direction. And we did talk about Gardner Main Street. I mentioned that you were on the board, and that would be a really good connection.
First time I've ever
So-
said it out loud.
I didn't know.
Yeah.
I didn't know you were.
Chris, did you were looking at me and.
No, I'm good.
And I was just like, did you have a question? Yeah. Okay.
And if you're having conversations, especially with larger employers or municipalities about workforce needs, the gap they're seeing, like that's really interesting to bring back and say, look, this is literally where we gotta fill the hole.
Yeah, we need
Because
that
we'll get better
education.
buy-in and commitment.
And at our
That's the way it goes.
At our fall conference at the end of next month, Bill Daggett is our keynote speaker, and I heard him the first time, 10 years ago, maybe a little longer. He's kind of a futurist. And, he said, the first time I heard him, he said, your kids are gonna change careers 10 times in their life. And that's where we are. So this kind of thinking that you're doing and probing that you're doing is something that we're on the potentially perched on the front end of, rather than having it hit us in the back of the head. We may have some feelers out as it starts to come along, because it's here, and being prepared for the future is a really good idea.
You may want to have, or you may want to have conversations with the is it Work in Maine? Who is anticipating what our work needs for the state. I mean, I think that might be a really good conversation to have. I'm sure they have insight that we would be unable to get at this level, so.
And then,
That's a good
we have regular meetings with our workforce, regional workforce board. That I've been to one this year so far. We'll have others that come up, so there'll be lots of opportunities to kind of get more information and be more clear about the needs that we actually have, so. Yeah, there's definitely more to do, more to explore.
But again, thank you for even trying, because it takes a lot of work to even look up over the edge and say like, there's more out there. That takes effort. So thank you.
Yes, thank you. Good work.
All right, that's
That's what we have.
what we have for tonight.
And we have 4 months before we start the budget.
Not for me.
I know.
Start sooner than that.
It's tomorrow morning.
That's
you
not
know. Thank you, Andrea.
November,
for-
2
for
months?
All that you, all you're doing. I appreciate it. And Gabe, for all you're trying to do. Thank you. And Josh, good thinking. Thank you guys for coming out.
Does that mean we're adjourned?
I think we are at 7:09 and 48 seconds.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. I hope you enjoyed date night.
Yeah, it was so exciting.
Cheap date